I'm going to pull something up for you because there is something I do want to talk about in Q, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course.
Did I? Okay. So you remember your debate with Coley, right?
Yep.
Okay. You brought up, for example, the whole Lord. You know the Lord argument, right? That
Yes,
Jesus,
I do.
it
Yep.
does in Q say that he is Lord, right?
Yes.
Okay. You said in earliest manuscripts, so just for the audience sake, you agree that in Q, Jesus does say he's Lord, right?
Yes, from what I remember, yes.
Okay. Your reply, what was your, can you just tell me your reply to Cole? I want to, instead of me trying to steelman you, why don't you just say it?
Yeah, from what I remember, I made a very quick response that it's not in the earliest manuscripts, Lord, in the Septuagint, but I can even grant it is, and I still think the argument's bad.
Okay, so the argument for those who don't know is that in Q and in the Gospels, Jesus calls himself Lord. The only other person ever make that claim is Yahweh. Well, it's in
And the
Ezekiel, it's in the
Septuagint.
Psalms, it's in the Septuagint. So in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, uh, we see, for example, God being called Lord, Kitty. And Jesus has, and so there's nowhere in any Greek text from that time or prior does anyone ever called Lord other than Jesus and Yahweh. So when Jesus is calling himself that seems to be, as according to scholars like Staples, Michael Patrick Barber, Charles Quarles, Robert Bowman Jr., Ed Komashevsky, this is Jesus definitively claiming to be God. And so what is your reply to that? Instead of me just trying to steelman it, just go ahead and say it.
Yeah, so the response is one, a lot of scholars, majority of them, as John, because not John, sorry, Jason. Jason Staples is the scholar that actually made this popular. So if you just share my screen here. So Jason Staples says himself that there's evidence based on like the earliest manuscripts having this development. Basically, the development here is that in the Septuagint, early on, there wasn't this version where Kyrie was the divine name. Rather, it would have been different forms of the divine name rather than Kyrie, but this is a Christian evolution. That's what majority of scholars hold to. That's what Jason Staples says himself in his writing. He says, on the basis of this evidence, many scholars now regard Kyrie as a later Christian standardization rather than the original rendering of the Old Greek. And then, yeah, so basically the point would just be that many scholars already conclude that this whole Lord thing is a Christian evolution within the manuscripts of the Septuagint rather than it being the earliest form of the divine name.
Have you looked in the most up-to-date critical edition of the Septuagint?
No, so I've looked at what Jason Staples says on the topic as well as Anthony Meyer.
Yeah, so here's a screenshot from the most up-to-date critical edition of Psalm 108:21. And he is pointing out it's in the majority of the manuscripts, it's in early, it's also in Codex Sinaiticus as well. It's kitty. So we see in very early ones, we see that there. So the evidence.
How old is this one?
This is the critical edition. So this is the scholars who put this together, like what is it, like Gottinger, I believe is his name. He went through all of them, and it's in the overwhelming majority of the manuscripts, including majority of the early ones. We see kitty in Psalm 108.
How early it is. So maybe the earliest manuscript we have for the Psalms here post dates what I'm saying, where the evolution occurred.
No, that's not what he's saying. It's only in later ones. It's in later ones.
No. What I'm asking is the early ones. So where does where in this
the
critical
text
edition?
Critical edition
in this critical
decision.
the critical edition is going to use the earliest they have. But how early is this?
Well,
thing
that's
has?
one criteria for text critical. It's not just we literally copy the earliest.
Yeah, but I want to know what's the earliest manuscript for this.
The earliest.
He's showing you the text critical edition, and it has made the decision that was part of the original text.
Right.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make what the
based on the
literal
fact,
first manuscript says?
So when is the earliest manuscript for this for the Psalms? Do you know?
For this one, I think it's Codex Sinaiticus. Now, I could be wrong, but it's definitely in Codex Sinaiticus.
Okay, bro, that's late because I'm positing that the development happened after.
But you have no evidence.
Show me one.
So I'll give you the. Yeah, I got
show
you.
me. Show me an old Greek manuscript of Psalm 108:21.
Here, can you share my screen? So this is the scholarship I'm referring to. So you're saying that it's in the Codex Sinaiticus, and the Codex Sinaiticus is 4th century. But as Anthony Meyer notes, the development we're positing comes comes earlier. So it says the start. So if we just read the context here. So
go ahead and read it.
Manuscripts that date on paleographic grounds on the Second Temple period, because the content of the Greek translation is relatively consistent with the Hebrew Aramaic source text. We might assume that the same holds for divine names and epithets as transmission crossed from Jewish to Christian scribes. It would seem plausible, in other words, that terms for God found in Christian copies of the Septuagint would represent the same as in earlier pre-Christian copies. The startling reality, however, so he's refuting that, is that all Jewish Greek copies of the Septuagint before the late 1st century have surprisingly divergent divine name readings, none of which contain the standard title Kyrios. He says none of them. Regularly found in all Christian copies of the Septuagint, albeit in the Nomina Sacroform KC.
And we have and then you have one of Psalm 108:21 there.
Say it one more time.
Do you have Psalm 108:21 there?
I don't remember him bringing Psalm 108, no.
Right, because again, as the critical scholars have pointed out in the earliest editions where we see that verse, as well as Deuteronomy 3:24, it's kitty kitty. Now the verse in Ezekiel, if you actually go to the critical edition, there's only one kitty there in the critical edition. That's one of the verses Jason Staples uses. But in Psalm 108:21, Deuteronomy 3:24, it's kitty kitty. And so what they're saying is that is the most likely original of the first of the translation. So they did have kitty kitty.
So do you see how this, even on the basis of whether Lord was in the Septuagint early on, is already on speculative grounds, but I'll grant you it. So
Okay.
I'm going to grant you that in the earliest Septuagint manuscripts, that was the form. And when Jesus says it, he's claiming it. So that's your claim. And I'll grant you the Septuagint has it in the earliest form. So I'll grant that part of the argument. So when he says, Lord there, they're going to call him Lord. In that context, there's more reason to assume that he's not claiming to be God there, just from the mere fact that sharing two titles between one another, right, doesn't tell us much about the concept, just more shows sharing titles. So we don't want to do the word concept fallacy here. So what I'm positing is that the concept of the theology in the Gospels is one of Jesus not being God, if you take a holistic case. So it just makes it very improbable that what you're saying is more likely, which is that Jesus is referring to the divine name. So I'll just go to a verse like Mark 10:18. Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good." That's also in Matthew and Luke. So when Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good,"
hold up. This is Mark.
He's
You're talking about
subordinating
Q,
himself
though.
to the Father. Say
You're
one
talking
more
about Q, though. Is that in Q?
That part, no. We can bring other parts in Q. No
But
problem.
okay, but you talked about Q though. You talked about the Q. You just granted that in the earliest versions of the Septuagint, it says Lord, and in Q, Jesus is calling himself Lord. So if you go to what Kloppenberg puts in Q, Luke 6:46,
Yep.
why do you call me Lord, and not do what I say? How is Jesus
Yeah.
not claiming to be God there?
Yeah, and I'm granting you that that's within Q. I thought you were making, because you were referencing back my debate, so I thought you were making the case just generally Jesus is God.
No, because we're talking about Q. We're talking about what is Q. You said Q is completely compatible with Islam, and I'm
Yes.
not sure it is. And there's one
It
reason
is.
right there.
Yeah, it is. So the reason why is we have no reason to assume high Christology within Q, so there's no reason for me to read high Christology into Lord there.
Well, this is now your circular argument. Okay, we
Yeah,
assume
no,
that
it's not,
we
because-
assume there's no high Christology, so that can't be high
No,
Christology.
and we can actually give evidence for that assumption. Why? If you look at the earliest Christology within the earliest texts we have, no one thinks Jesus claiming to be God. So that's highly implausible to think that Q thinks that
What do you
Jesus
mean?
is God.
What do you mean? That's a
Okay,
nonsensical argument.
Does anyone? Okay, I don't believe anyone in the first century.
I believe that
believed Jesus-
everyone believed Jesus to be
Okay,
God. And that's why
let's-
Christianity
so let's
exists.
discuss
It wouldn't
that.
exist if the disciples didn't think
Okay,
that
I got
Jesus
you.
was God.
I got you. So
Post-resurrection.
let's use the earliest sources here. Let's use the earliest sources. So you want to say that Lord here with Q means he's claiming to be God. I'm saying that within all the texts we have, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, of what Jesus says, and in Thomas.
Hey, you want to use
nothing-
the earliest
nothing-
Well, that's
text?
not the
nothing-
earliest.
What do
Hold
scholars
up.
say the earliest
Wait,
text of
you
the
gotta
New
let me
Testament
finish.
is?
You gotta let me finish my point.
But
My point is,
there's an
is that
issue though.
within all the sayings of Jesus that we have, none of it does he give a Christology where he's claiming equality with God. So there's no reason for me to think in Q he's claiming to be God.
Okay, hold up.
Hold on.
So
Can I
the
just
earliest
jump in for a second?
Yeah, but real quick, the earliest documents. You want to go to the earliest documents? That's
okay, you're gonna
all
say
in the
something.
pre-Pauline literature, like Philippians 2, where Jesus is called
Not
God.
claiming to be God.
In Philippians 2,
Philippians 2, within Mark, within Matthew, within Luke, within John.
okay, so here's what we're doing here. we're doing a circumstantial evidence argument instead of doing a proper exegesis of the text. Okay, if you're granting Lord, as the critical edition shows, was in the earliest manuscripts, and Jesus is claiming that, that would support our theory that, yeah, in Q, Jesus is claiming to be God. And by the way, this doesn't even work, because even if you're right about Mark and Philippians 2, Q is just unique. And maybe that's the guy that was really the founder of Christianity and not Paul.
Yeah, you know that's so implausible, dude. So
Then show
is there
me
anything-
why
so-
Lord,
so
Lord
do
doesn't
you-
mean God.
But
okay,
hold on,
I'll
hold on,
grant
Dean.
you.
Hold on, Dean.
So-
You said that
so
no
I'll
one
respond
believed
to what
Jesus
Mike
was God.
says.
You said no one believed Jesus was God.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Co-equal with the
the
Father, yeah.
pre-Pauline Christological creed of Philippians 2 believes Jesus to be God.
No.
So that is clearly someone believes that Jesus is God before the text of the Gospels was formulated.
No, that's wrong.
Right.
So if you mean God as in co-equal with the Father, that's not what Philippians 2 is saying.
Yeah, it is.
Nope.
What is it saying then? Let's hear your interpretation.
Yeah. Let's go to it.
Can you just put it on the screen? I'm going to put up the ESV
Yep.
because that tends to be the one I was most
all good.
used. So here, I'll read it for you, and then I would really like to hear your interpretation. We'll let you do that. So, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under
I
the
got
earth,
you.
and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, the glory of God the Father.
I got you. So if you just zoom in on that part where he says he gave him a name above all names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So does Jesus inherently have the name above all names, or does he have to get given it?
He is given this as he's exalted after the resurrection. So he's lowered and then he's exalted back up to where he was originally.
Okay.
That's what's
So where is there an indication within the text here that he had it at any given point?
the first part. Though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped.
Yeah. So what's the Greek there for when he says form of God? Are you familiar?
I do not know off the top of my hand. No, the top of my
Okay,
head.
no problem. So Ignatius uses that same Greek within his letter. If I just pull it up, 1 second. First, let me just have a look at the Greek here so I can have it. So he uses the same to refer to the believers. So I'll say your reading's anachronistic. It's not actually representing what Philippians is
Well,
trying to say.
why are you appealing to a much later Christian letter and calling
That's-
that and
No,
calling our reading anachronistic?
Ignatius is early. You don't care what Ignatius has to say? He's early.
Well, you said you want to go in the earliest.
Yeah.
So this is
yeah,
what we're
I mean,
doing.
Ignatius is
Q,
well
equal
after
to
this
literature?
text.
Okay, if
right?
you, I'm quoting it for you, but if you don't care, that's fine. We can throw Ignatius under the bus. That's fine. So there's no reason for me to
That's not
assume that
the
he had the name above all names within the text here. And well, from what we know about Pauline Christians, I grant you, Mark is an early Pauline Christian. They didn't believe Jesus was co-equal with the Father. He says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." What's your response to that?
Oh, that
Why do
one's
you call-
easy. Just read the rest of the passage.
Rhetorical question.
Yeah, I want to hear what Mike has to say. Go ahead.
You want to hear what I so about Mark 10:18.
Yeah.
So just to acknowledge, we're now moving to Mark away from Q, right?
Because we want to know what Pauline Christians believed.
Okay, well that's not even been established.
hold
You're
on. What do you
stuck in
think-
these other assumptions?
What is
Because
your
you're
evidence
trying-
that
because-
Mark
because
is
you're
influenced
trying,
by
You're trying
Paul?
to bring up the fact that
What is your
Philippians 2
influence
is saying that Jesus. Yeah.
What is your evidence that Mark is influenced by Paul?
Yeah, we need to get these assumptions justified first.
Yeah, there's no reason for me to think otherwise. His theology is quite clearly Pauline.
Well,
That's not a
okay,
reason.
He
okay.
talks about Jesus' death.
How do you
on
know
the
Paul's
cross.
theology
Je-
isn't
Jesus-
Markine?
Jesus'
Right?
death on-
That's a
yeah,
stupid
I got you.
argument.
I got
They,
Jesus'
they
death
share
on
the same
cross
theology.
as
Yeah, they
forgiving-
share Christian theology, the same theology every
Yeah, so
Christian has.
is there any good reason to think he's not Pauline?
I think that Mark, Matthew,
Is there any
Luke,
good reason to think he's
John,
not Pauline?
and the rest of the New Testament
I
all have
think
the same
the
theology.
category is an assumption
Okay,
that's
you're
not been
trying-
justified.
Okay, so we can agree that Mark 10, or Mark, just the author of Mark, that is, has Pauline theology, right? Mark believes.
know,
No,
I'm
I
not
agree
granting
that,
that category.
I agree
Not
they
granting
share
that-
the same Christian theology. They
Okay.
have
Christian
Christian
theology.
theology.
Yes.
Does Mark contradict what the author of Philippians believed?
No.
Of course not.
Okay, beautiful. So when Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good," what's your response to that?
So why do you call it's a rhetorical question, as I've said in the past in videos. I've used an analogy. So it's like if you have, for example, like let's say like we found out we were pregnant. My wife is pregnant, but we didn't want to tell anybody yet. And someone come up and asked me, "Hey, I heard you were gonna have a kid," and I didn't want to reveal yet because we haven't announced it. I'd be like, "Well, why would you assume I'm gonna have a kid? You can't have a kid unless someone gets pregnant." I'm doing that as sort of a rhetorical move to not lie, but also not give away the message.
Okay. So when you say it's rhetoric, what's the actual meaning behind it? What's he trying to get the men to believe?
He's trying to get him to think about what it is to actually be good.
Okay. So when he says, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good," who's God in that statement?
So that is, for example, up for debate among different scholars. But I mean, like,
can you share my screen here? If you don't mind?
If I said, "Why are you calling me a Christian?" Would that be me denying that I'm a Christian?
Yeah.
Depends on the context.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Here, I'll put your screen
Does
down.
depend.
over there.
So if you look here, okay, so it says the rich man calls him good teacher. Then Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? None is good except God alone." Who is God in that statement here?
So that depends. So
I'm asking your opinion. Who's God there?
Jesus is not given the context yet. This is what I mean. You're reading a lot into this right here because he's talking to a rich young ruler, someone who is probably not one of his, obviously not one of his followers in the text. And he's just asking him a rhetorical question. Like, so is he referring to the ontology of God or a specific person? He's not even specifying.
Right. So you're what you're saying is you're unsure, yeah?
We're saying Jesus does not specify.
Jesus doesn't specify who God is here, yeah?
He just talks about God,
Okay.
to use your term, generally.
What's the possibilities you can give me right now?
I said
About who's
ontology
referring
or a
to?
specific person.
Or a specific person. So if here it was the Father, what would your interpretation be of that?
Jesus is just asking a question.
No, but there has to be some rhetorical force behind that question, right?
Yes, the simple question is
so
this.
if
He's
he
like,
says-
hey. His simple question, the rhetorical force is this.
Yeah.
Hey, like, hey, we're both humans, right? Would you say that only God is good? Like, that's what he's trying to, like, and so that is not an admission of anything. That's just him trying to get the guy to think before he can move on to another point.
So do you remember when you brought on Mike Lacona and he gave you two interpretations on Mark 10:18?
No, I've had so many streams. I do not remember that
All good,
stream.
all good. So when you brought up Mark Lacona, he gave two interpretations for this. He said, look, Jesus could be denying his goodness here, but he could also be equally saying that why do you call me that? Only God is that, in the context of, if you're calling me good, you're calling me God, right? Those are the two options he gave, right? Now,
again, I don't remember the stream, but I'll take your word for it for now.
no problem. So you can check it later. So let me see here. If you just share my screen. Okay.
You're going to go to the church father quotes?
Yeah. So my point is that he gave two options. Either it's rhetoric, and he's saying, if you're calling me good, you're calling me God, right? Or Michael Lacona gave the other interpretation, which is, why do you call me good? He's denying being good here. Michael Lacona's interpretation, which is the rhetoric point, which I find more convincing than what you were saying about the whole goodness thing, that it doesn't possibly work anymore if God here is the Father. And we know that everyone within the earliest interpretations from the church fathers or the earliest citations of the church fathers, they saw God here as the Father, not the being or not God generally.
But all these church fathers believe that Jesus is God. So
not co-equal with the Father. Not co-equal with the Father.
And
that's the point you wanted to give. That's the point you were trying to give with Lord, Lord.
Here's the problem. You're appealing to what they say about the meaning of this verse, but they don't see any conflict between this verse and their theology. And you're saying that what they say about this verse contradicts your theology.
It's because they're subordinationists, that's why.
No, I disagree with that. But I mean, like, again, it's just a rhetorical question at the end of the day. Like, for example, if I would say, like, let's say, like, I'm talking to a foreigner. I'm trying to give you an analogy to try to help to see where we're coming from on this. And the foreigner was talking about, like, how the country is run. And he has decided, let's say he comes from, like, a place where they have a king. And he's like, yeah, the king does this. And, like, so your president has this kind of power and that kind of power. And I go, well, hold on a second. Or why would you think that? Does only the president have power to like sign something into law? Now I'm just asking a question at that point. I'm not actually saying that's true or not, because there's other ways in this country to pass a law. Like if you have I think it's like two-thirds or it's like 3/4 of Congress agrees, then you can pass a law without a presidential signature. So just asking a question like that is not revealing your in-depth, deepest theology when you're just trying to get somebody to think and walk them through an argument. This is why I think people read way too much into Mark 10:18.
Okay, so there's good reasons to think that that's just it's not a good probable reading given the context, because the first thing is Matthew.
Can I ask
the
you a
Matthean
question?
scribes?
Let him
yeah,
finish.
I
Let him
just-
finish.
I just
Let him
started
finish.
my response. Yeah. So the first thing is that when the guy calls him good teacher, he goes on and he stops calling him good after Jesus says, "Why do you call me good?" So he actually understands from Jesus' statement as, "Don't call me that." Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that the second thing
that's
is
not
that Matthean.
justified.
The second thing
Why,
is
why
that
would he repeat the
within
word
Matthew?
good?
Yeah, dude, like Mike, you just said I was going to finish.
Sorry.
Yeah. So within Matthew 19:17, what does Matthew render the question? Do you know, Mike?
I have to pull it up to remember. I do not remember off the top of my head
problem.
as normal.
The Matthean scribes actually changed the text here to make it, "Why do you ask me about what is good?" This is a common theme from Matthean scribes, where when they have anxiety towards a text where it's contradicting their theology, they try and distort it. Similar with Matthew 24:36, where they try to omit "nor the Son" from the manuscripts. Okay, so
I mean, this
the-
doesn't
even-
change
even-
anything.
so
We're
even
talking
the
about
Matthean-
Mark.
I'm showing you that early Christians found it so problematic they distorted Matthew.
I mean, that first of all,
Can I
that's an
ask you a question,
assumption.
dude?
Well, hold on. Let me just say
It's
that
not just
that is an
There's evidence
assumption. For
it.
example,
There's evidence.
there are many reasons for scribes to change things or to do things. We cannot assume that it's always anxiety. That's a logical leap. But again, we have moved from Q to Philippians to Mark, and now we're going to Matthew scribes. I mean, let's just go back. I mean, why are we jumping
I'm
around?
giving you
like all this?
justification. I'm giving you justification that Mark
My question
didn't see
my
Jesus
question
as
will
God,
clarify this.
and I'm giving you early Matthean scribes distorting the passage. There's no good reason beyond
So if I
the
could
fact
show
that
you
go on.
one place, if I could show you some place in Mark where Jesus is definitively set up as God, would that convince you?
Yeah, that would convince me that Mark has Jesus being God, of course.
Okay,
But then
well,
you're going to say, well, that's not in Q, and I only care what's in Q anyway.
No, I never posited that. What?
Then why'd you bring up Q in the first place?
granting you.
See,
I'm granting
okay, so
you all of
your
Mark
whole
right now.
thing, right? Your
I'm
whole
granting you
thing
all of
was that
Mark.
you were
Prove
here
to me that Mark
to
presents
argue that
Jesus as God.
Islam
Go
is
ahead.
true.
Okay, I will.
We know you were just playing a game, right? You just really wanted to continue your previous discussion. But theoretically, what you were positing is that Islam is true because the theology of the earliest source, Q, agrees with Islam. That was
Yep.
your posit. That was
Yeah,
your
it
whole
gives- it
justification
gives-
for bringing up this
The
discussion.
Quran gives us the earliest Christology. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. You said, well, it could be read as subordinate. And we can
Like to be read as
disagree
subordinate,
whether or
yeah.
not the fathers actually taught that. Is subordination consistent with Islamic theology?
No, and that's why I don't posit that these guys
Okay,
are
then
Muslims.
you go.
No,
Then,
There you
yeah,
go. So
that's
you
the
went to
whole
this for
problem.
no reason whatsoever
dude,
because it
Thaddeus,
teaches subordination
Thaddeus.
according to you, and that's not consistent
when
with Islam.
when you say that Jesus is Lord, Lord, and you say it's in the Septuagint, are you saying Jesus is claiming to be a subordinate God?
no.
I'm not making
No,
any claim
that's the
other than
point.
that. I'm not
That's the
making a claim. I'm not making a claim about what the
on, dude.
theology of this text is. I'm saying that your claim about what the theology of the text is
I'm saying your claim is
doesn't
anachronistic.
agree with your
claim
position
is anachronistic.
based
Wait,
on
wait.
nothing. You appeal to
Your-
these
your
later
claim is
sources. You've done this
anachronistic
again
because
and
when
again.
say
You call.
Jesus says-
You call.
Yeah, let me finish, dude. Are you gonna let me finish? My claim
I.
is that
You
your-
didn't let
my
me
claim
finish.
is
You
that
interrupted
say,
me
Lord,
and then
Lord.
said, "Let me finish." Amazing.
I mean, dude, you're raising your voice, speaking over me. I can let you finish if you like. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. The whole time you keep bringing up later texts as claims about what this text means, and then saying our view of the text is anachronistic. So be consistent. Either you can appeal to later understanding of the text, or you can't. You can't just appeal to it only when it benefits you. That is not valid. And you've provided zero evidence whatsoever that any of this is consistent with Islam. Just every time we addressed, or not really we, it was all Mike, but every time he brought up a question about the text, how this is consistent with Islam, you ran somewhere else. You said, look, this other text, which is later than the text I'm appealing to, says something different. So therefore, they must have had different theology. And that's not a valid conclusion. That's not how you logically think about something. Just because they have different words doesn't mean they have different theology. I have seen no evidence from Q or anywhere else that the earliest Christians did not believe that Jesus was God in some sense. I'll grant you that subordination
some
is a
sense.
logical possibility, but that
Okay.
still contradicts Islam, as you just admitted to me, right?
Let's let
So
Dean-
you do
let's let
so
Dean
you do
respond.
grant they don't teach that Jesus is God. You can't substantiate that.
Wait, what? No.
What?
That's not what he said.
I didn't
Okay.
say that at all. I'm
Okay,
saying
so-
the minimal, at minimum.
Oh, at minimal. Okay,
Understand
yeah,
my
go ahead,
argument.
yeah.
At minimum,
Yeah.
at minimum, they are
Yeah.
saying that Jesus is God in
All right,
some sense.
Let's let Dean now
and
respond.
and for your argument to work with Lord, Jesus would have to be identified with being co-equal as with the Father, because he will be Yahweh. And I'm telling you that that isn't an anachronistic reading. That's why I gave you all of these early texts showing you this Christology is foreign. Now, my
Dean,
point is,
okay,
dude,
go
I
finish.
just let him ramble for a long
Yeah,
time.
go ahead.
Come on. So
ahead.
Ramble.
here, so what we have is the earliest texts give us zero Christology that this Jesus was identified with Yahweh, co-equal with the Father. Zero. So your reading of Lord in Q is anachronistic. That's my claim. You use these earliest sources. You believe they have, obviously, some soundness to it. And I'm giving you these earliest sources to inform your understanding of what Lord means in this context. I don't mind it. Now, the earliest Christologies of Jesus are completely like, there's a whole variety. Philippians has a higher Christology than what you find in Mark. Mark has a higher Christology than what you find in Q. Q doesn't give us Christology that's incompatible with Islam. I'm yet to see anything convincing for that. Now, when I give you texts such as, why do you call me good? Only God is good. Why am I? These aren't much later even. These are giving us the earliest understanding in the first century that Jesus wasn't identified as God. If he's not identified as God, then he isn't being identified as Lord most likely in Q. That's my claim.
Questions?
Can you refute that?
Question.
Your claim
Yeah,
makes
question.
no sense.
So you talked about Philippians having a higher Christology than Mark. Does Mark have a higher Christology than what we see in Islam?
In parts, yeah.
Okay, so it's got a high Christology. Philippians has a high Christology. So by your own logic, the circumstantial evidence you've been trying to present is not presenting a view of Jesus that's compatible with Islam. Therefore, by your own reasoning, we should use that circumstantial evidence to read Q in that light and also agree it has a higher Christology than what is in Islam. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, so the response to that is the earliest Christology you find in Q, you find within, for example, the Epistle of James, these Jewish Christian sources. As scholars like James Table points out, you have Q, you have James, the Epistle of James, also being a Jewish Christian source. You have this stream of Jewish Christians where they have this low Christology, and the Quran is reviving that earliest Christology. So can you prove
keep
from?
calling
So
it
can you
earliest.
prove from? Can you prove from Q or from James or from any source being a Jewish Christian source that we can
Think about
derive
the
this
logic.
understanding?
Think about the
yeah,
Q
go on.
is the one in question. So Q is the one in question that you're trying to help use. We're not arguing for proper exegesis of Q anymore. We're just using circumstantial evidence. So far, we've had Philippians. You've admitted has a higher Christology than Islam. There's just a pre-Pauline. I guess you would agree Paul also has a higher Christology than what we have in Islam. So that's two. Then you have Mark has a higher Christology than what is in Islam. So we have three sources right there that are helping us inform how to read Q. All are contradicting Islam. Now we're jumping away to James. We keep jumping to different books. Okay. So even if you're right, that's 1 versus 3 right there. And we should be reading a higher Christology in Q.
We're not doing a numbers game. Q is not Pauline in any sense. Where anywhere in Q does it have the Pauline theology that you find within Mark, Q, etc.? Show me.
Wait, that's
Hold
not
on.
my
Hold
point.
on. There's a central point here. You keep letting him get away with saying that Q is the earliest. Scholars do not agree with that. They would say that Philippians, the pre-Christological
I said it's the
creed of
earliest
Philippians-
gospel. Is
Pre-Pauline.
Philippians a gospel?
It doesn't matter whether it's a gospel
okay.
or not. The earliest
Athanasius is
Christian
right.
theology is found in Philippians. And you're saying the earliest Christian theology is captured in Q, which is consistent with Islam. But it's essential to your argument that it's earliest, and Philippians is the earliest. And you already admitted that Philippians has high Christology. So the earliest Christology, by your own admission, is high.
Coming through Paul, that Christology is high. But I don't believe that what Paul says represents what Jesus was saying. Do you have
Wait a minute.
scholarly backing what Paul is saying matches with historical Jesus?
This is not the point, though. The point is about what Q is. The point is a Q.
Yeah,
You
the
said
point is
Lord,
what
Lord.
Jesus is saying. Yeah.
The point is in Q, which you admit says Lord, Lord, calls Jesus Lord, Lord, cannot mean Jesus is God, even though we've got no text from that time where anyone else has ever called it other than Yahweh. And your point was to look at circumstantial evidence, later texts, and say, well, no, they have a different Christology. But then you admitted those later texts have a higher Christology than Islam. So by your own logic, you said we should read Q in light of those other texts. We're doing that. And now we have to say Q contradicts Islam because the Christological context from these other texts, Mark, pre-Pauline, Paul as well, all are disagreeing with Islam.
Yeah. Q is coming from a different streamline of sources.
Then why did you appeal to
Q-
those sources
Q
to
is-
begin with?
Because I'm showing you that no one has the idea that Jesus is Yahweh, dude. And you're saying Lord, Lord means he's Yahweh. You're falling to anachronism.
Except they do. Except
Who
they
believes
do.
Jesus is Yahweh? Go ahead. Show me.
If you read
Ew.
the entirety of Mark believes it. If you read the entirety of Matthew believes
Where?
it. If you read
Go
the
ahead.
entirety of
Where in
Luke,
Mark?
Luke
Go
believes
ahead,
it. If
show
you
me.
believe the entirety.
Show me.
You can go passage by passage. Jesus repeatedly claims things that are found only, or descriptions applied only to Yahweh.
Yeah, that's fallacious.
For example, what do
But
you
go
mean
ahead.
it's
You give me the
fallacious?
example. Go ahead.
Well, hold on a second. If
Can
you don't
we-
even know what my example is, how can it be fallacious?
Because you just set up the principle, which is only Yahweh does something, then Jesus does something. But go ahead.
Okay, fine. Let me rephrase it. If he uses language that's specifically applied to Yahweh in the Old Testament and not other figures.
What does that prove? That doesn't prove anything.
So I can just claim to be the first and the last, for example.
Is that a
and it
Mark?
doesn't mean anything?
Is
I
that a
didn't
Mark?
say it was a Mark.
Oh,
I'm
okay, so
providing
how about you give an
It's
example
analogy.
to Mark, and then we can discuss it. Go ahead.
Well,
I can go back there.
no, because you've said that it's not a valid argument. So there's no point in giving an example if the argument in itself is not valid. So I have to first establish the argument's valid. So if I claim to be
It's not
creator
valid,
of the
'cause
universe,
you have to establish
is that
you mean it-
language that
Yeah.
that
You have to
would be
establish you mean
claiming
it in
I'm
the
God?
same sense. You have to establish that you mean it in the same sense, and it's not analogical.
So if I say that I'm the creator of the universe, that doesn't mean anything in your mind. And you can
If-
establish that I'm claiming to be God from that
If the
statement.
context, for example, first and last, that's something that's different to what you're saying now, because this we know the usual.
I've changed it to
the
creator.
usual usage of the word. We don't have any context that I know of that someone's called the creator of heavens and earth that it could mean otherwise. But for example, King of Kings. Someone might say King of Kings is a title that's only for God, and yet we have Nebuchadnezzar called the King of Kings in Daniel 2. Daniel's
That's
not saying
fine.
that Nebuchadnezzar is God. So
I
that's the
wanna
example
bring
I'm
up-
giving you. So how about you give me an example from Mark that establishes your point? Go ahead.
Before we go to Mark, can I go to James first? Are you okay if I look at James?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
All right, I'm going to read for you James. Let's just read James chapter 5. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. Who is he talking about in verse 7? Would you agree that's Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. Do you agree this is talking about Jesus?
Yeah, that's fine. Jesus is going to come back and judge. We believe,
Got
we
it.
believe this in Islam.
The prior chapter, there is only one law and only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Do you think he's talking? So only
Here he's
one.
talking about the Father. Yeah. So what's happening here is
Whoa,
he's
whoa.
talking about the Father, and in the other context, he's talking about Jesus. The same way, he's calling only the Father judge, but you have in the Old Testament a book called the Book of Judges, or you have in Jesus talking about judging in the Gospels. Oh, come on, dude, this is such a weak argument. Come on.
That is
Come on.
you're assuming univocality there. That James is going to use the word judge the same way the author of the book of Judges is going to use. Here he's
Or
saying
Jesus.
that
I'm granting where Jesus uses the term judge even.
okay, yeah, people use the term differently. I think, for example, Matthew uses the term proskuneo differently than Luke is going to use it, for example. That's one of my arguments I used to make the show Luke is saying Jesus is God. But I mean, like, this is the point. He actually does seem to give a higher Christology than what you're going to find in Islam as well.
No.
So now we have
Because-
four
because-
witnesses
okay,
to help us
I'll
influence
give
you.
you no. I'll give you the example that I don't grant that at all. So within James, you have only one judge. I agree. In Islam, don't we believe there's one judge?
I do you? Because
Yeah,
I
we
get
do. We
different.
believe there's only one judge,
different
which
Muslims.
is God, right?
Okay,
So we
fair.
believe we believe the only judge, ultimate judge, is God. Do we believe
Okay.
that Prophet Muhammad? Do we believe that Prophet Muhammad is a judge?
Do you?
Yeah, in the Quran it says they do not believe until they made you a judge over them.
Okay, interesting. That's
Okay.
I'm going to
So
think about that in
then you
terms of
also
an
have
odd
here's
issue
another
for
one.
you, but okay.
Here.
I mean, it's not helping you.
This guy.
How is that
You
helping
believe when
you?
the Quran, you believe when the Quran says there's one judge and then it calls the prophet a judge, that you don't believe that you're equivocating right now by thinking it's the same.
No, I'm saying that's
Come on,
kind of that
dude.
could very well be a contradiction if you look more into it. But I mean, like this has nothing
Dude,
to do
oh
with my
my
point
days.
about James's.
Dude, this is being so uncharitable at this point. Let's be real. Let's be real. Come on.
No, you acknowledge that,
Obviously,
and you
obviously
acknowledge
the author
in
of the
James
Quran
5.
here.
You acknowledge in James
Obviously the
5
author-
that's Jesus who's the judge, but then you agreed that
Yeah.
in chapter 4 that that's God. So I mean,
The
like I don't know what
the
to tell
same
you.
way the Quran says Allah's the ultimate judge, but calls the prophet a judge over everyone. Yeah. And then we have hadith saying that Jesus is going to come back as a just king to judge. Come on, this is a very weak
Okay.
argument. Come on.
But that's not James. James says there's only one judge. Notice the
Let's
difference.
let's finalize this discussion because I think it's been going for like an hour. So
Well,
you
I
can
want
make
to go
your
to
final
Mark 2
point.
first.
Yeah, no
I wanted to
problem,
do
yeah.
James and Mark, okay?
Yeah, go on.
So my
Yeah,
point
yeah.
is we have high Christology in those 4 works. Mark chapter 2, I'll just say it flat out. He calls him Lord of the Sabbath. The only person in the Old Testament who's Lord of the Sabbath is Yahweh.
In Mark 2?
Mark 2.
Okay, so let's pull it up 1 second.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to put on the screen. My mistake.
That's all good.
Yeah, I'll read the last part. On one Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields. As they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. Excuse me. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, what are they doing? What is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need, and was hungry, and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath."
Yeah. So only God's called Lord of the Sabbath in the Old Testament, yeah?
Yes, the only person who's ever presented as Lord of the Sabbath is Yahweh.
Okay, beautiful. So this actually proves my point because I don't believe Jesus is talking about himself here. I believe that he's talking about general humanity. So let me
Really?
make the point. So let me make the
go,
point.
go.
Let me
Yeah,
make the
please,
point.
please do, please
let me
do.
make the
Yeah,
point.
please.
Okay, beautiful. So for most scholars, when they read this, they actually say that. So do you okay, let me just bring this up then. Let me bring up Mark 2. Yeah, here we go. So when he says in the context that at the time of Abiathar, David came and there was an exception to the rule where he was able to be given the bread that was only meant to be for the priests, right? That consecrated bread that was given to David, Jesus' point is that the same way my disciples, they're eating grains and whatever, that the priest also allowed for the companions of David to do something exceptional. The point is that you can do something good on the Sabbath day. If you're hungry, you can do this, right? The same way you can heal on the Sabbath. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's his point.
So okay, beautiful. So the context is that laws are made for humanity, not humanity for the laws. So then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man. He's meaning humanity here, not humanity, man, for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man, so you're saying that's the reason why. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So the most likely reading is he's not saying Jesus himself is the Lord of the Sabbath. You made my point for me, that humanity is called a title that only God has in the Old Testament.
Question for you. So Son of Man is referring to humanity?
Yes.
Let's go back to let's just read earlier then. Okay, so here we have let's start in the earlier in the chapter. This is about him healing, okay? And so in Jesus, let's just start in verse 5. And Jesus saw their face, and he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the scribes were sitting there questioning in their hearts, "Why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they were questioning within themselves, said to them, "Why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your bed and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Here, Jesus forgave sins and then says he's the Son of Man, speaking of himself in third person.
I got you. So you're going to have to just give me a minute to speak because this is a complicated topic now about what Son of Man really means. So you have, dude, you can laugh. Yeah, you can laugh like a little dog. But
It's very complicated when you have
when-
to reinterpret it instead of just going with what the text says.
Everyone knows there's the Son of Man problem in the Gospels. If you're ignorant on that, that's on you, bro. So
The
the Son of Man is
the
used
Son
in
of Man
different-
problem. I don't have any
Yeah,
problem
dude.
with it.
Oh my
It's
God.
Jesus'
Can you- yeah,
title
dude,
for
can you
himself.
like shut
And
your
he's
mouth for a
referring
second?
he's referring to
That is-
Daniel.
Dude, I'm
Let's
speaking to
let's let him
Mike.
do
I'm
it.
speaking to Mike.
Let's let him do it. Let's just let him do his thing. It'll be. I'm Please do it in a way that's not going to make the interpretation of the text ad hoc.
I got you. So the point is that Son of Man is used in different ways in the Gospels. It is either used in a way meaning the suffering Son of Man, or it's used in the sense of the Danielic Son of Man, right? And then you also have Son of Man as meaning humanity. Now, Son of Man meaning humanity is the way it's being used within Mark 2:28. You can make a good case, I'll grant you it. Mark 2:13, there's a good case that's talking about the Danielic Son of Man who's given authority by God in Daniel 7. I grant you that. But the point is that the context for Mark 2:28 gives the impression, like you said, you don't want ad hoc interpretations. The impression is the whole context is humanity is not made for the laws. The laws are made for humanity. Therefore, the Son of Man is general humanity. This is pretty much a standard position in scholarly circles. That Son of Man here means humanity. Do you not agree with that?
Can you show me a place in Mark where Son of Man means humanity?
Right there, the context right there.
No. That's the one in question. You need to show me.
Yeah, but
a place where
I
it
gave you the
explicitly
context
shows
to
that.
justify it. I gave you the context.
No,
You read the context.
I don't agree with that because he's talking about himself. That's the way Jesus always uses this phrase. He's always calling himself the Son of Man, talking about in third person. Why would the term shift in the very chapter just a few verses
Because
later?
of the because the context shows you man was made for the Sabbath, not Sabbath for man. Therefore, the Greek there actually means therefore. That's like making the point.
So in your
therefore,
view, then,
the Son
in
of
your view,
go ahead.
in your view, question then. So humans are Lord over the Sabbath.
Yes, that's the point.
Where in the Bible does it say that? Because it's very clear
Right.
that Yahweh is Lord of the Sabbath in Exodus.
Okay, how in the context at all? If you just bring up Mark 2 again, so we can have a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll pull it back up.
Let's keep it there.
So real quick, so you agree, Son of Man in this in
Son
the
of Man
first
in
one-
Mark is used in multiple senses. I just told you.
Okay. Can you show me a place where it shifts meaning anywhere in this chapter?
Dude, the context of Mark 2 shows you it's obviously talking about humanity. So the context is about, that's why I told you the context beforehand. David's companions were able to eat from the bread because of the fact that the laws don't take importance over humanity. Humanity's needs takes importance over the laws. That's the point. That's why he says it's justified for the disciples to take from the grain. It's justified for the disciples to take from the grain because the laws are made for them, not them for the laws. That's the point.
And so
Son of Man here
Jesus-
means humanity.
But Jesus says, so the Son of Man is even Lord of the Sabbath. Therefore, he gets to decide what the Sabbath, what the rules and regulations
Yeah,
are of the
humanity
Sabbath.
gets to decide. Yeah, that's right.
No, he gets to decide. That's the point.
Where-
The
where
point
does-
is
where does it-
not
Yeah.
right
Go
there.
ahead.
But the Pharisees are
But
saying,
the
"Hey,
context
you
is
can't
talking
do this
about
on the
humanity, not
Sabbath."
himself.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's talking about
here.
him and humanity. Here. Let me explain to you what's going on in this passage. So
Yeah.
the Pharisees are saying you can't do this. That's on the Sabbath. And he's going, whoa, you don't understand the rules of the Sabbath. Okay, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I am Lord of the Sabbath. I get to decide what the
He
rules
doesn't say
are.
I'm Lord of
That's
the Sabbath.
point.
You're adding it to the text. Read from the
I'm
text.
paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing is my point.
Read from the text, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the Son of Man is even Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's humanity. You can't refute that from the context.
Yes, I just did. I showed you the
Yeah.
prior context of where it was used earlier in Mark to explicitly refer to Jesus, and in this he's doing something.
And by the way,
similar.
Mark 2 can be taken as humanity. By the way,
can you show me
and Mark 2 that could be taken as humanity as well. By the way, so
that
if you pull
humanity
up-
can forgive sins?
Yeah, don't the disciples forgive sins?
They forgive in Jesus' name. This is when I brought on. I believe it was
Okay.
actually like Kona.
Okay,
He pointed
beautiful.
this.
So the point is that humans can be
no,
given authority
me.
to forgive sins.
I don't want to.
Okay.
I want to correct myself. I was Daryl Bach when I brought on Daryl Bach over the. I think it was in May. He pointed this out. It's only through the power of Jesus. It's only on his behalf. Is what he.
Okay,
pointed
no
out.
problem. He's given them the Holy Spirit and they're able to forgive sins. That's the point. The point is they're able to forgive sins. So humanity can be given the authority to forgive sins in some sense, whether it's in the name of Jesus or whatever. That's besides the point. The point
Yeah,
is
that was not my point about
you-
this
you
passage.
can-
My point was that the Son of Man is referring to Jesus.
I got you, bro. If you pull up Matthew 9:8, that's the parallel passage. Pull up that.
Okay.
That'll show you that you can take Mark 2 as meaning humanity there. So Matthew 9:8, what does it say there? So this is the parallel passage for the Son of Man authority.
Yeah, the authority.
When
given
the
to men,
crowd
yeah.
saw it, they were afraid, and they glorified God who had given such authority to men. So that's men in the plural, correct?
You're misunderstanding my point, though. My
But is that
point was
men in the
not to
plural there?
use. Yes, but you're misunderstanding my point
Okay.
in trying to
So
make
Son of Man,
this.
there's humanity.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay. My point is that Son of Man is always referring to Jesus. There's no place it ever refers to humanity. The crowds are saying, look, the only person who has authority in this passage to forgive sins is Jesus. Okay.
Okay, so is Jesus one man or multiple men?
He is man.
He's man.
And
So why did they say men?
Matthew,
So
yeah,
the
them
point.
using just because they're just using standard phraseology. Jesus was a man. He was forgiving sins. Holy crap, men have authority to forgive sins? And it's
Yeah,
just referring to, it's just taking an overview of the
Gospels
passage.
the Gospels present that multiple men can forgive sins, correct?
Through Jesus, as Daryl Bach pointed out when he's on my channel.
Whatever it is, the point is that you can extend this to humanity. Whatever you want to say, it's in the name of Jesus
I
or
know.
Holy Spirit or whatever.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
Okay,
That's not my
yeah.
point. My point is that when any time in the Gospels the Son of Man is brought up, there's never a time where you can definitively say, yeah, this is not referring to Jesus. The overwhelming majority of scholars say in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, when Jesus is talking about the Son of Man, he's talking about himself. Overwhelming majority.
Yeah. So they don't say that in Mark 2 at the end, that's humanity.
That definitely does not say that
They don't.
humanity.
Okay. Give me one scholar. Go ahead.
Who says this is Jesus?
Yeah, this isn't talking about humanity. It's talking about Jesus.
Daryl Bach, Robert Bowman Jr., Ed Komaszewski.
I'll give you. Okay, no problem. I'll give you here from Mark 2:28. 1 second. Just pull this up here. Okay, here we go. So if you go to the search for the authentic words of Jesus, the 5 Gospels, what did Jesus really say? You familiar with that book?
No, I've not read it.
Okay, no problem. So in
Really?
page 77. So
Wait,
they
who's the
basically
author?
they try to it's a whole seminar of scholars.
It's a
and
Jesus
people.
seminars
Jesus
foundational
Oh.
work.
Okay.
Oh, that.
So
okay.
Yeah,
if
that's
you
why
go-
I said
if you go to
really.
page-
That's what you're going to.
If you go to page 77, they actually commented on what Son of Man is, okay? So it says, the Jewish scriptures portray the human being as the agent to exercise control over every living creature. The ideal decisively shaped Jewish visions at the end of history. And then it brings up the Son of Man from Daniel 7. The phrase Son of Man is employed in 3 different senses in the Gospels. 1, to refer to the heavenly figure to who is to come. 2, to refer to the one who's to suffer and to die. 3, to refer to human beings. Okay? So then they go on to say for the third one, where it's referring to human beings, they say, 2 sayings highlight the authority of the son of Adam on earth. In one instance, to forgive sins in Mark 2:10. In a second, to lord it over the Sabbath in Mark 2:28. These sayings appear to conform in the first 2 senses drawn from the Hebrew Bible mentioned earlier. Okay, so we have here from the Jesus seminar, they're saying there's these different usages, and they were agreeing that Mark 2, within both passages in Mark 2, Son of Man here is being used as in humanity.
Yeah, I don't see that at all in the. That's why I was trying to do a proper exegesis of the text. We don't see that, and just saying that's what they say, that does not make that magically the case.
I already showed you the context to support that. In Mark
No,
2:28.
we disagreed on that context supporting that. Now, here's my simple question: is this presentation of Mark presenting Jesus in this way, does that contradict Islam?
In the way that he's Lord over the Sabbath?
Lord over the Sabbath, able to read hearts, able to forgive sins.
That's fine. That's fine. But being able, okay, we're going to deal with that one by one. First of all, with Lord, because each of these require exegesis. So if you're talking about Lord over the Sabbath, yeah, he's able to determine as a prophet when something is prohibited or not prohibited. Same way that a human being can also have that sort of ability to look at a situation and try to decipher what is okay at certain situations, what is not. That's totally fine. Lord being the Lord of the Sabbath in that sense, that's fine. If you're talking about reading human hearts, do you believe that that's only property given to God alone?
We only see in the Old Testament that God can read hearts.
Okay, you just made my point for me again. When God is given one property that's due to only Him alone, or one title that's given to Him alone, right? You're making the assumption, therefore, the person has to be God if they're also given that. Are you familiar with the Psalms of Solomon?
Yeah, a while back. I've not read them any time recently. It's not like I have them in front of me or anything. But
And you
what about
you didn't
them?
mishear. You read the Psalms of Solomon, Psalms.
Yeah, not the Psalms that are in the Bible. Yeah, these is I think this is Apocrypha, if I remember correctly.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So let me bring this up. Okay, 1 second. So in the Psalms of Solomon,
Not in the Bible.
yeah, it's not in the Bible, but it gives us an understanding that people, Jewish, a Jewish group at the time that wrote it and accepted it, and they were circulating. They give us an understanding
Heretical for
of
Christians.
yeah, they give us an understanding of the milieu at the time. Okay, so
Okay.
let me.
I mean, I'm not going to, this is going to be irrelevant because I'm not going to believe that every Jewish text from the time is going to be agreement with what the Bible teaches
No,
or
no,
what
no, no, no.
Christianity teaches.
I'm not making that point. Yeah, I'm not making that point. So let me just bring this up here. Okay, there we go. So just share my screen if you don't mind.
All right.
Okay. Psalms of Solomon 17, a Psalm of Solomon with song concerning the king. So as you said, it's apocryphal. It dates to the 1st century BC, most likely written by some Pharisees. So they actually talk about the Messiah, and they say the Messiah will condemn sinners by the thoughts of their own hearts, which shows that early Jews already before Jesus' time believed other than God could read hearts.
Good for them. Does the Bible present that?
So your argument doesn't work. They read the Bible, didn't they?
Yeah, they got it wrong. That's the point. The Pharisees got the Bible
They
wrong
got
all the
it wrong?
time. Yes,
Okay,
all the
so-
time.
Okay, so perfect. We have Jews already coming before Jesus' time that believed when God says some stuff about himself, it doesn't have to be only for himself, because they also ascribe it to the Messiah, which they didn't believe was God. So
They can be heretics.
in the same,
that's fine.
yeah. So in the same way, we're going to use that in light of what Mark 2 says. Jesus fulfilling messianic expectation from the Jews at the time that he'll condemn people by their hearts, not messianic expectations that Jesus was meant to be God. Now,
So
and that's compatible with Islam, because you asked me a question. That's compatible with Islam as well, because a prophet can be given the ability to read hearts of men. No problem. That's just a prophetic knowledge. The last point you said was on forgiving sins, right?
Forgiving
that would only be-
sins, being Lord of the Sabbath, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So the forgiving, I already established the Lord of the Sabbath and other stuff. So with the forgiving sins, God is the ultimate forgiver of sins. Jesus can be given the authority to pronounce forgiveness of sins on earth. That's compatible.
So he's given authority. So here's a simple question then. Because this is all about going back to Q. That so with Mark, is there anything in Mark that you
Minimal.
think presents a high? But you said earlier when we were talking about Philippians and Mark, it has a higher Christology than Islam, though, right?
Yeah, in parts, Mark has a higher Christology.
There
and
we go.
So does Philippians. Yeah.
Okay, because all of this was just trying to get you back to this main point here. I kept doing that, taking you through the weeds on purpose to get you back to this point. Your original point was we cannot say Lord, Lord in Q means God because there's so many other sources around that have a different Christology, but all those Christologies around still contradict Islam. So by your own logic, the Christology of Q should also contradict Islam.
No. That was you misrepresenting my point. My point is that for Jesus to be Lord, Lord, he has to be Yahweh, correct? That's your point.
My point is that is the simplest and most parsimonious understanding of
Okay, beautiful. And my point is that that's an anachronistic reading of how these authors in the 1st century were depicting Jesus. It's anachronistic. So does your argument work with Jesus being Lord, Lord in a subordinate sense? It doesn't. You have to have him be Yahweh, right? And that's my point.
No, here's
You
the
realize
problem,
that
though.
Jesus is Yahweh in subordination, right?
Here's your problem, though, with that. Okay, you have not presented anything from the text. You just said we need to look circumstantially around to understand the theology of Q. We did that. We went through James, we went through Philippians, and Paul by extension, and now Mark, and you're all agreeing this Christology that you think is going to help support you, the earliest Christology, is still contradicting Islam.
No, you misrepresented me because I never said James contradicts Islam. Mark contradicts Islam on its Christology minimally. Like in Mark 14, where he says to be the Son of Man that comes with the clouds of heaven, etc., etc., and they take it to be blasphemy. That highly exalted figure. That's fine. But the point is that minimal stuff within Mark contradicts Islam. Pauline texts contradict Islam on the Christology. I can grant that. They had high Christology early on. No problem. But the Jewish Christian sources that we have, being those that James Tabor mentions, he says himself they're compatible with Islam. This is how Islam depicts Jesus.
Oh,
You
question.
got Q, You got
Question.
One second. Just let me finish my point.
Okay.
Q, Didache, and James, they all depict Jesus in a fashion where that's compatible with Islam and its Christology.
No, they don't.
There's
Definitely
not,
not
there's
Didache.
nothing in there that contradicts Islamic Christology.
Michael Bird points out in the Didache, they changed the liturgical formula, Hosanna to the Son of David to Hosanna to the God of David. So they take that saying about Jesus and they change it, Hosanna to the Son of David, Hosanna to the God of David. So that has a very high Christology, as Michael Bird points out in his book, Jesus Among the Gods. But I mean, like,
No,
here's my
Moses
question
is
I
called
wanted to
God
ask
in the
you.
Old Testament. Dude, that doesn't change anything because
Elohim, it's
'cause you-
different. That's a Hebrew word, doesn't mean the same thing.
Because you're equivocating. Okay, Elohim, how's it translated into the Septuagint?
It's often translated as, I believe, Theos.
Theos. Okay, so Theos
Mm-hmm.
is used within the Didache, is it not?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so that's the point. Exodus 7:1. You have Theos.
That's
within
that's
Moses.
assuming
Does
univocality
that-
now.
do- do we
Univocality.
have high? So do you have high Christology with Moses?
No, we don't say that. But again, let me go back to my point though. Do you think, for example, Mark and Paul, they contradict each other in some ways? Because you said they have different Christologies, right?
Mark has a lower Christology than Paul. Yeah.
So they contradict each other in ways. So then why can you appeal to them to help understand how the author of Q wrote when he wrote Jesus saying
Okay.
Lord, Lord, as evidence that he didn't believe? Because you now admit these guys had
Because no
different
one in the first century
Christologies
believed
that
Jesus was God.
Hold on,
Okay.
let me finish. They had
Go
different
ahead.
Christologies according to you, but you said earlier we need to look to them to understand how this saying in Q happens. But by your own logic, they all contradict each other, so we shouldn't be using them at all. We should just be going
Okay.
on what Q says, or at least the reconstruction of it, which I don't
Gotcha.
think is valid
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
So I'm not saying we use Paul as our interpretive lens of what Q is saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that even the highest Christology you can bring up from the early church, even those Christologies, they don't meet the requirements you need for Lord, Lord to mean Yahweh. Paul, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, any of them. None of them meet the Christology that's needed for Lord, Lord to mean Yahweh. That's my point. I'm not saying that you use them as interpretive lenses for Q. Of course not.
then set them aside and let's just go on that. Because again,
No, because no one in the first century believed Jesus is God. So why would I grant that Lord, Lord here means God?
because that is
You're,
evidence
you're
that
saying
someone
you
did.
can't use them. You're literally saying you can't use them as an interpretive lens while using them as an interpretive
No,
lens.
no.
Yeah.
And that's
I'm
not
making
even
a
correct.
distinction.
While using your interpretation of those passages as an interpretive
So-
lens.
Yeah, I got
for
you. So,
Q.
so we're saying is the milieu at the time, it's foreign for them to believe that Jesus is God. No one teaches
Yeah,
that.
but we don't
No one
agree with
teaches
that. We
Mark
think that
2
these texts are teaching that
Mark,
Jesus
Matthew,
is God.
Luke, John, none of them teach that. So there's no
Matthew,
reason
Mark,
for me
Luke,
to
and John
think
do
that
teach
Q-
that.
Okay, so can you give me a clear verse that teaches that he's God there? Go ahead.
Lord, Lord, we've given you that over and over again.
That's
best
what's in
understanding
question,
of that.
dude. Where's the
Yeah.
Christology that Jesus is God within Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John? Where is that?
Listen, we're talking about Q. That's what we're talking about. Q.
But
Again,
that's-
show me a
dude,
text
dude,
from that
Do
time
you
where
understand?
anyone else is
Can you
called
repeat
Lord,
my
Lord.
point for me? Mike, can you repeat my point for me? Why am I
You're
appealing
trying
to
to
early
get-
Christologies?
Because you're trying to say that no one in the first century thought Jesus was Yahweh.
Yes. So why would we
Okay.
assume Q is presenting Jesus as Yahweh?
Because you agreed that there's different Christologies, so we could just follow you down that path and say Q had a higher Christology in line with the Didache, where they called him God.
Okay. So you believe it's likely that Q is presenting Jesus, given you're granting what I just said right now. There's a foreign Christology in the first century of Jesus being God, as in co-equal with the Father.
Okay,
As
I
being
want to
Yahweh.
say this,
Eh,
so I'm not taking.
given as you grant that, you're saying that
He's
it's
not
still
granting that.
likely. You're saying that it's still likely that Q is representing Jesus as Yahweh, but it's just because it has a different Christology. Is that what you're saying?
I want to say this so I'm not cut out or taken out of context. If you're right in your interpretations, and we thoroughly disagree with how you're interpreting Mark, Luke, Matthew, all of them, if you're right, you already said that there are different Christologies. So this would just be another Christology that became the dominant one if you were right about those things. And you have to acknowledge that that did become the dominant Christology.
So do you believe that that hypothesis is likely or unlikely?
Which your
The,
hypothesis?
the one you just said right now, that you could just say Q has a different Christology amongst these other Christologies that are subordinate, but Q just represents Jesus as God. Do you think that's likely or unlikely? Or just possible? Do you think it's just possible or is it probable?
I'm just going to say possible because there's so many assumptions you've just put in there that I'm not
beautiful.
granting.
Okay, so that's not a good case. Then you're just saying mere possibility. I think we've
No.
finished here.
That's not what I said at all.
Is the
You've taken
evidence
me out of
actually-
now you
what
hold
is,
on,
what
hold
is
on,
IP
hold on,
actually?
Thaddeus.
What is your actual position, IP? Because
Yeah.
he's trying to make you affirm a position that's not remotely yours. What's your actual?
Yeah,
position?
he took me wildly out of context. I mean, that's why I said that earlier. Like, I'm going to say this because I don't want you taken out of context. And then you just did that, man. Okay, my position is that
Yeah.
the earliest is in line with people like Michael Patrick Barber or Michael Bird, that the earliest Christology is a very high one, like what you see in the Didache where Jesus is called God, or what you see in what you think Q was, where he's called Lord, Lord, which is, again, a term only used for Yahweh. That means those early authors thought Jesus was God.
Yeah. So actually, that position is not what you presented before. You were presenting before, listen, I'll grant you it. Early Christology was subordinate, but we're just going to
No.
say that Q. That's
He
what you
didn't
just
say
said,
that.
dude. What?
No,
He literally did not say that.
You can replay it, but it's fine, whatever. So
No,
the
bro,
here-
you're taking me out of context
no
in
problem,
so many ways.
no problem.
Notice I
I'll-
said earlier, if
So kids-
you're right, that's what I was
that's
talking
the point,
about.
yeah.
If you're right.
And I'm responding to that hypothetical, dude. Are you okay?
I'm just making sure
You're responding to
understanding
the
where I'm coming
hypothetical
from.
that you're right.
Yeah,
prove
given
that
because
IP
he's
is
saying
wrong.
given that you're right, we can still explain it this way. And I'm saying no, you still can't explain it that way.
Why so? Why can't we say that the
I just
author of
responded
Q?
to dude, and then okay, I just told you, and then you just went on saying that's not my actual position. Okay, let's bring it back. So repeat one more time so everyone understands what you're saying. In response to me saying that there's these subordinate Christologies, no one believed Jesus is God in the first century. What was your response to that? And then with Q, go ahead.
Yeah, even if you're right that Mark in Philippians, the pre-Pauline in Philippians has a what is it, subordinationist in some sense, you could still make the case there were just contradictory Christologies, which you said existed there, and then Q would just be a divergent view on your view.
And here you're positing that Q would be a divergent view where Jesus is Yahweh. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm asking you, like I asked you before, is that hypothesis you're giving right now, is that likely or merely possible?
Likely in how?
Oh my God.
Because I would say it's
Answer-
likely the author of Q
So
is
what-
saying
what
Jesus
I think
is
what
Yahweh.
Dean wants to say is, in the Bayesian, what is the Bayesian probability that given the first thing is correct, it's 100%, then what would the likelihood be?
It'd be
Yeah,
very
that's the
high
point.
because, again, thank you,
God.
appreciate that. Yes, yeah, because so again, it'd still be very high because, again, based on Staples' argument, we don't have anyone else ever claiming to be Lord, Lord other than Jesus and Yahweh.
Okay, dude, that is like just to make it clear for everyone why I believe that's unlikely. We have all these Christologies that are circulating. Yeah, Pauline epistles, you got the Gospels, you got apocryphal texts, etc., etc. None of them depict Jesus as Yahweh. But Mike is saying to me now that even if I grant you that, Q could just be representing Jesus as Yahweh with the Lord, Lord phrasing, because only God has it in the Old Testament. But that is very unlikely considering Q would have to giving us a forward Christology that we don't see in any given text, right? And he's still saying that's likely, right? Which would just mean that if you're really saying that that's still likely, then I could say that there's a Christology out there that matches with Islam, right? And that's likely given the fact that Q, with my interpretation, it's out there and it's likely given that my interpretation of Q is correct. Would you say that that's fine to say?
No, because you have to include Lord, Lord in your reconstruction of Q.
Okay,
and then
but if I
would
do address,
contradict it.
but if on the condition that I do address the Lord, Lord, and I show from the earliest manuscripts it's an evolution, given that I do show that, then the Islamic Christology is likely to show from Q.
No, and here's
Why?
the reason: is because
Why?
you can show textual evolution in some texts, while there is different Christologies in other texts. So just because there may have been evolution in one group, that does not mean it's going to happen in another group.
Yeah, but your point was predicated on the idea that there's different Christologies, and you said that Q could just be one of the other Christologies, right? Now, Q saying Lord, Lord, I gave you one example before, but I'll give you another example now to address your argument, to show you that even the Q Christology, we can't say that it's saying this Yahweh. If it's true that Son of Man in Mark 2:28 is humanity, that would mean that there's a title of Yahweh alone in the Old Testament that's assigned to other than Yahweh, correct?
What I mean, it's an odd thing to say. I mean, if you could prove that and you haven't, then yeah, that'd be very weird to be giving a title of Yahweh to humanity, which I think is making the point for me. But go on.
Yeah, but the point is that the majority of scholarship already agree with me, given the context I gave you, that's talking about humanity. So that actually addresses the Lord argument, because we can show contextually humanity is called a title that only Yahweh has in the Old Testament.
So you believe that is a title only of God.
Yeah.
And it's being used in Mark 2.
Yep.
And you think that's referring to? I mean, this works against you. It seems very
No, it doesn't.
unlikely.
Because it's used in a way. Do you know what analogical predication is?
Yeah, go on, continue.
Okay, so it's using analogical language here, where the humanity is Lord over the Sabbath, but not in the same way as the Father in the Old Testament. So that's just going to be the same thing here. When Jesus is called Lord, Lord, that's used in an analogical way, not in an equivocal way, where it means the same thing in the Old Testament.
Do you remember what I said earlier about not being ad hoc? This is ad hoc, is now you're positing that for some reason there were these Jews who wrote Mark and they wanted to take this. It's much simpler. It's much more parsimonious to say they're just using the title and that to refer to Jesus because he is Lord.
Why is it unlikely?
Because you're positing additional layers. So you got to posit a layer. So the authors of Mark, let's say the author of Mark was a Jew. He has this belief, an additional belief we have no evidence for, that he wanted to take these sayings and reinterpret them for humanity. That instead of him just taking those sayings, which are clearly about God, and then clearly applying them to Jesus, that's a more parsimonious explanation of the text than these additional layers you have to posit to save Islam.
No, it's not, because, okay, to be quite frank, your response to Mark 10:18 was ad hoc. Mark 13:32, your interpretation's ad hoc and heretical, by the way, for most Christians. All these interpretations you give for these passages where clearly Mark's not intending Jesus to be God is way more ad hoc than what I'm saying right now. With
You're just diverging away from the actual topic here to try to change.
Because because you're telling me it's not parsimonious given the whole context, and I'm telling you, given the whole context,
even if you're right,
you pause it.
Right, it doesn't matter
pause
because yours is still ad hoc in this sense.
Yeah, Mike, let me finish 10 seconds. My point is that given Mark holistically, he doesn't believe Jesus is God. I show that with Mark 10:18. I can show that with Mark 13:32. And your arguments for him being God is always based on assumptions like only God does X, Jesus does X, therefore Jesus is God. Only God is called X, Jesus called X, therefore Jesus is God. That requires a lot more assumptions than dealing with the concepts at hand. Jesus having less knowledge, Jesus having less goodness. That is the concepts we should be dealing with, not titles and word concepts.
No, I'm going to completely disagree with you there because, again, Jesus never says, I'm not good. Again, you want to talk about being ad hoc. That's very ad hoc for Mark 10:18 because he doesn't actually say that. He asks a rhetorical question, again, as we pointed out.
Doesn't Mike going to give it as a possible response?
You're talking to me right now, not Mike Licona. Are you going to actually
you agreed with
stuff I'm saying?
Dude, you literally were like, didn't give.
It's not a question of possibility. It's a question of probability.
Yeah, and the point is, given probability, why do you call me good? Only God is good. God there was always interpreted as the Father. We can actually make a good case that it was cited as Father early on, and that was the earliest version. Regardless, if Jesus is saying, why do you call me that? Only the Father is that. On the apparent, no assumptions, he's saying, why do you call me that? As in, don't call me that.
Yeah, that's not at all what he says. You're really reading into that, and that's my point.
Okay,
I can use rhetorical questions all the time, and we never jump to that conclusion.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Mark's Christology. If you're gonna give that response for Mark 10:18, we're gonna go back and forth on that. Another major point that I believe shows that Mark doesn't have a high Christology. He has a lower Christology. Jesus says he doesn't know the hour. What's your interpretation of that?
No, we're not going to keep jumping around. We've jumped around to so many things here.
All you guys' interpretations of the text are ad hoc.
I want to get back to Q. I want to get back to Q here again.
Jumping everywhere. He wants to keep you on the subject.
No, we're not jumping everywhere.
Yeah,
you brought up Mark 2.
Subject, for the love of God.
No, you brought up Mark. You brought up Mark 2.
Mark 2:28.
You brought up Mark 2.
Because you brought up Mark.
Stop lying. Stop lying. You brought it up.
No, he brought up
Don't say IP brought it up to justify.
Yeah, he brought it up first.
You brought it up to so-called prove that everyone didn't believe that Jesus was God at that time.
Okay, we can replay it. We can see who brought it up first. You brought up Mark 2 first to say Jesus says he's the Lord of the Sabbath. Did you not do that, Mike?
That was
you're
well
misunderstanding.
after.
Yes, you're misunderstanding. You brought up Mark and to say Jesus isn't God, and I brought up Mark 2 to say that Jesus is God.
And then I'm bringing Mark 13:32 to show he's not God, and you're not engaging.
Anyway, back to the point about Q though, because
Are you
again,
going to
this is
engage with
all
Mark
about the
13
wo-
or not?
This is all about Lord, Lord, and you're trying to get away from that for some weird reason.
Yeah,
You want to
and
go
I'm
to other
giving you-
places. Again, I have already granted that if you're right, this has nothing to do with Q. If you're right about Mark's Christology, this has nothing to do with Q, which calls Jesus God through Lord, Lord, just like the Didache calls Jesus God by calling him God when they change the liturgical formula from Hosanna to the Son of David to Hosanna to the God of David. So we can use that right there. So this doesn't help you at all because you could still argue the author of Q had a much higher Christology.
No, you can't. And the point is, I'm establishing to you that Mark doesn't believe Jesus is Yahweh. Matthew doesn't believe Jesus is Yahweh, but you're not engaging with the fact that they say Jesus doesn't know the hour. Can you engage? Matthew 24:36.
Who is the first person who says?
The same text.
Dean, we have let
One
you
second.
jump from passage to passage.
And
I'm
you're
trying
ju-
to get to
and
the
you're
main
bringing
subject.
passage and passages. You're bringing.
I'm
passages
trying.
too.
I'm trying to stick to the main. Who do you say is the first person to say Jesus is Yahweh? What's the first text then?
It's gonna come in and around Nicaea, around that time,
So no one before said Jesus was Yahweh.
in the same sense as the Father, co-equal. No.
But that's not what I'm asking. Jesus is Yahweh. Some people did say that before, even though they thought it was like a subordinate version, like in a sense, I guess. He was
What
Yahweh
do you
in
mean
a
by
sense.
yeah, you're gonna have to explain what you mean by that because now you're saying in a sense.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what you mean because you said in Nicaea, but were there people saying Jesus was Yahweh?
So
before in-
I'm talking about Jesus being Yahweh, as in Jesus being Lord, Lord, as in Jesus being the God of the Old Testament. No one believed that until around Nicaea.
So okay, so even if you're right about that, we could just use that context to just then read the earlier texts because you're saying we should use Mark and James to then like say, well, it wasn't there. But
Yes.
I could just say, okay, well, actually, no, there were other people who said it later, and they got it from these earlier texts. So
Where's
that's where they're
evidence for
getting
that?
it from.
Yeah, so then I could just give a good argument from silence and say we would expect these earliest texts to show us that we don't have it. So it's an evolution rather than them taking from earlier traditions.
So but here's the problem, though. You just brought up silence. That you're doing the same thing when it comes to
Yeah,
Q.
it's
You have
a
no
good
one who
argument from
said-
it's a
You
good
have no
argument
one
from silence.
around-
Can you
no one in
show
Q.
can you show anyone before Nicaea that held to Jesus being Yahweh in the same sense as the Father?
Yes, like
Who?
Gregory the Wonder Worker, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's bring. Okay.
all
By
of
the way,
these-
Gregory's writings.
We're not-
Okay, here.
We're not going to
Let's
go
stick on
through
one.
these. We're not going to go through
Let's
these.
stick
We're
on
not.
one. Let's
No,
stick on-
we're not. We're not.
So
As I
what's
said,
the point
we're
of listening
done
then if you're
jumping
not going to engage? What?
because I'm trying to get you back to Q. That's what I want to talk about. You keep running
so
from
why-
Q.
so why would you bring
on
this up then?
Q? Because
Yeah.
you keep running from Q, and I keep trying to bring you back
And
around.
you're-
Is the
and
point?
you're bringing up church fathers after Q.
So then, on Q,
What?
is there anything within Q that would make you suggest Lord, Lord does not mean God? If we're just going to stick with Q.
There's nothing in there that makes me think that it's saying that Jesus is God.
So what is the context in Q that shows Lord, Lord does not mean God?
No, I'm saying there's nothing within Q that gives me a high Christology. That's my point.
The Lord,
So
Lord.
there's not.
but
So there's nothing that makes me think that Lord has a high Christology.
not the fact.
So
that,
if you
like,
remove
there's
all
no
the parts,
text.
if you remove
Not the
all the
fact that what,
parts
sorry?
that does, then nothing does. Got it.
Yeah, it sounds
Okay,
circular
okay,
because
you-
you're saying you're
it's not
saying there's no
circular.
evidence. You're saying there's nothing, but I mean, that in itself is strong evidence because again, as Michael Patrick Barber, Jason Staples have pointed out, no one was called that other than Yahweh, and here Jesus is
Yeah.
calling himself.
And
that.
no one's called Lord of the Sabbath except for Yahweh. And I believe humanity are called Lord of the Sabbath. It's that easy.
That is so speculative, and it's not as explicit as what it is in Q when he just says Lord, Lord. That's clearly a title.
And by the way, this whole argument of titles isn't dealing with concepts. It's very weak. I don't find it convincing.
Wait, so people could just have titles that are explicitly the name Yahweh?
Just the title itself doesn't tell us much. When Jesus is called King of Kings, it doesn't tell us much until we know the context. Similar with
You're right.
Nebuchadnezzar when he's called the
You're
King
right.
of Kings. It's analogical language. So the
You're right.
same way,
You know why you're
yeah,
right.
the same
You
way
know
when
what-
Jesus called Lord, Lord. Let me establish it. When Jesus called Lord, Lord, I could just say it's analogical language again. What's the issue?
You know what? You know why you're right? It's because we have examples where other people are called King of Kings. We don't have any other examples of anyone being called Lord, Lord, except Yahweh and Jesus. So that doesn't apply there.
Okay, but you see how, but Mike, you see how, even if I didn't have an example where someone else is called Lord of the Sabbath, I could still think that Jesus being called Lord of the Sabbath doesn't mean he's God, because there's a possibility someone is called it. That's one. Or two, maybe no one else was called it, and it just so happens to be only God is called that. Why is that so implausible?
So you're arguing from possibility.
Yeah. Everything we've been discussing is possibility, probably.
It's all-
Yeah,
it's all-
literally everything, anything you could possibly say is a logical possibility.
It's just possible.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're arguing from possibility and probability. You have to try and increase the possibility to make it likely.
Okay, then what is the
And you
what
haven't done
increases it? And yeah, we've
Yeah,
gone through all these texts, looked at
when
circumstantial evidence.
So when I'm
doesn't
reading,
support it.
when I'm reading Q, for Lord to work, Lord would have to mean Jesus is Yahweh. He is God, right? And I'm telling you that Christology is anachronistic. You haven't established why it's not anachronistic.
Again,
Yeah, because everything you deny everything. So every time something's brought, you
because
deny
your evidence
it.
is weak. That's why.
Yeah, you can say that, but that isn't an argument. Saying your evidence doesn't
I'll give you an
count is not
argument.
an
Matthew
argument.
24:36. Are you going to engage with Jesus not knowing the hour?
No, because you've jumped to 20 texts
Okay.
already.
So you
we
see
don't
how
need to
you
jump
guys
to a
say-
21st.
You guys
text.
say, yeah, they're saying he's God, but you're not engaging with the verses where he's not called, where he's so clearly not God.
because it's irrelevant, because you said that these authors have different Christology. So even if you can establish that's what
Yeah.
Matthew is teaching, that doesn't show us what Q is teaching. That goes back to one of the very first things I said to you when you started bringing up Q.
My point is that the milieu, no one thinks he's God. So obviously, we're going to find in Q
And we disagree.
that Jesus isn't God. The same way with James, you failed to show me that James thinks Jesus is God. And I'm saying that Christology in James is very similar to Q. The same way James Tabor posits that.
So here's what's going to happen. Anytime we bring up anyone like the author of reconstructed Q claiming Jesus is God, you're going to say, well, no, he can't actually be referring to that because no one actually thought that. Therefore, this passage cannot be referring to Jesus as God. Why? Because no one actually thought that. Why?
Yeah.
So therefore, that's
so
circular.
you have to prove
That's
you have to prove
circular.
Can you prove someone thought that?
I'm showing you Q. And then you're saying, your response to me is, no one thought that, so that's not what that author can mean. And because no one thought that, that's not what this author can mean. That's circular.
Mike, I'll even grant- look,
Mark believes it.
This is
Matthew
my
believes
argument.
it. Luke believes it.
No,
John
it's not
believes
circular.
it.
You're misrepresenting.
Paul
Hold on one
believes
second.
it. The author of Hebrews believes
Yeah.
it. James believes it.
Okay, beautiful. Here, I'm going to give you an argument that Matthew doesn't believe it. And are you going to engage with it or not?
No, because we
Okay,
don't need to
beautiful.
keep
That's
going
the
to
whole
all
point.
these
You guys aren't
things.
engaging with the arguments that they don't believe he's God. Matthew 24:36.
Because your
Jesus
evidence is
says
the
he
same
doesn't-
every time.
Jesus
Going
says
to
he
another
doesn't know the
passage
hour.
isn't
Okay,
going to change
here.
anything. Every
Jesus says
single
he doesn't-
time, every
That
single
is-
time you say it's
You guys don't
logically
engage-
possible
you guys
that this
don't engage with
author
the
doesn't mean that, and you say, and since every author is logically possible to be interpreted some other way, no one taught it.
No, I'm
That
giving
is
you
your
probable.
great.
I'm giving you probable indications. So, for example,
You're
Mark
not
10:18
giving me probable
yes,
indications
yes,
of
I am, because
anything. No,
with
you're
Mark
not.
10:18, with Mark 10:18, did I not bring the early fathers interpreting it?
And
did I not bring the context up as points?
You brought
Did I
us
not bring-
early
did I not
fathers.
bring-
You
did I
brought us
not bring
early
up
fathers
scribal-
that believed that Jesus
did I
was
not bring
part
up
of the
scribal
divine
manipulation of
Godhead
Matthew?
in a subordinate sense. In your argument, I don't actually think they're subordinates, but in your argument, they're subordinates. But they
Are you
still
guys gonna
believe that
engage
Jesus
with-
is
are you
part
gonna
of the
engage- are you
divine
guys gonna
Godhead.
engage
They
with
believe
Jesus?
he's part of Yahweh.
that is-
The authors you are appealing to believe that Jesus is Yahweh.
Oh, okay.
And you're saying no one
They
believes that
believe he's
Jesus is
Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one more time. Are you going to answer how Jesus doesn't know the hour in Matthew 24:36 or not?
Again, Dean, this was
just
very
wanna clip
clear. That's exactly what's going on. You want to clip stuff here, and we've already acknowledged.
What?
Even if you're right about Matthew and Mark,
Oh my
that doesn't change
You guys
what
aren't
Q
engaging.
is saying.
You guys are engaging, man. Come on.
No,
I've
you're not
engaged with that
engaging.
argument
You're
a million
assuming- you're
times. I'm sure
assuming
Mike
bad
has
faith.
engaged with it a million times.
that-
We
I've
don't need to
engaged
engage
with
with
it
it
a million
again
times.
just
Assuming
because
bad
you want to
faith
jump
instead
to
of
another
engaging.
spot to try to get your little clip because you failed to get your
When-
little clip this whole time. You
Inspiring
just keep
philosophy
jumping to
clipped
something
me
else to try
last
to get a
time.
clip.
IP, did I clip you last time or you clipped me?
What, on our last conversation?
Yes. Did I clip you or you clipped me?
Oh, I clipped you in a short, yeah, because
Okay,
you were
beautiful.
threatening
I
to do the
didn't
same
clip-
thing.
And I didn't clip you for anything. So you're saying I'm with bad faith. I could easily say that more likely for you. and I'm still engaging
Because you've
with you.
demonstrated it. We
here-
didn't start
here-
out
you-
assuming you're
wait,
bad faith. You
you've never-
demonstrated it through the
audience
whole
wants to-
argument.
Here,
You've never clipped
Thaddeus,
anyone? You've never clipped anyone?
I
What are
didn't
talking
clip
about?
you,
You've
did
clipped
I?
people.
Am I engaging in
You've
bad
clipped
faith
other
with you?
people. You have clipped
am
so
I-
many people, Dean.
Okay, but am I
You're not, no,
engaging
you're
in bad
not.
faith with you?
You're not engaging in bad faith. This is a
thank
speculation.
you.
This is irrelevant to the point, though. Again,
So
going
why are you guys
back,
bringing it up?
because we're going back to Q, and again, we're pointing out
Okay,
the argument is
let's talk
circular.
about it.
We're
Dude,
talking
dude,
about how the
Bert,
argument is very
Mike,
circular.
everyone, be it on the Christian or Muslim side, wants to see an engagement on these Christological points, and this is relevant to the discussion about the Christology at the
No.
time. So
No,
are you,
it's
so
not.
are
You
you
know
gonna
why?
engage
You know
with
why?
Jesus? Are you going to
You know
engage
why
with
it's
Jesus
not?
on
Because
the
the
hour?
actual conversation was show us Islam is true, and I was letting you go through to try to make an argument to show Islam
Yeah,
is true.
Islam
You
shows
were
the earliest
building
Christology.
on Q. Your argument was building on Q, and I let you jump around a little bit, and I'm getting frustrated with it all because you're not actually talking about Q. You said there was nothing in Q that contradicts Islam. The Lord,
Yes.
Lord passage does. And your
And
only
I'm-
argument is
yeah.
like your only argument is no one believed that Jesus was God, therefore this author can't believe Jesus was God. That's
Yes.
circular.
No, it's not. Okay, I'll tell you why it's not circular. Because here I'm saying, okay, I'm looking at Q, the passage, Lord, Lord, and I'm saying there's two hypotheses. He's God or he's not God. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to establish which hypothesis is more likely. And I'm telling you that given the fact that all of these other texts, including Matthew, does not depict Jesus as God, and Matthew's reading Q, Luke is reading Q, they don't believe Jesus is God. Given these sources and all of these texts and all of these people don't believe Jesus is God, excluding Q, therefore it's unlikely Q is depicting Jesus as God. That's my claim. That's not begging the question. That's not circular.
And then we did a little bit of that with you. I didn't even give you the second argument for James that shows Jesus as God from like James 2:1.
you can give it. Go ahead, man. I'm engaging. You're not engaging.
No, I don't want to keep jumping around. I want to stick to Q. That's my point. I could keep
Okay.
jumping around and go to other passages. Like you want to go to the hour
Okay,
passage.
here. Matthew uses Q, correct? Under this theory that we're granting, yeah?
Sure. On your
Okay,
you
so,
believe the
so it would be
reconstruction.
it would be likely that Matthew depicts Jesus as God because he's using Q and he's using the Lord passage, correct?
No, not necessarily. It could be misunderstanding. it.
Oh, damn. So the
No, not necessarily. You.
I
you
mean, we're
jumped
talking
to
about
conclusions.
logical possibilities, right?
is
We're not
Matthew a
talking
Jew?
about what's the reality.
Mike, is Matthew a
Dude,
Jew?
We're talking. We're okay. Remember, we've granted this possibility for you already.
Yes. Yes.
That Matthew. Okay, so I'm not agreeing with you that Matthew doesn't say Jesus is God. I think he clearly does. But I'm on that. For example, no, he could just have missed it. He could have just misunderstood it. Okay, doesn't change the fact.
It's unlikely. I'll tell you why it's unlikely. Because you said in your own video the Jews around Jesus would have understood Lord, Lord to be a reference to the divine name. You said that in your own video. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, of
Is
course they
Matthew
would, yeah.
is Matthew most likely a Jew?
Yeah,
Okay, so he's a Jew that would have understand Lord, Lord meaning God.
that's why he
likely.
thinks Jesus is God. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. That's the whole point.